and welcome to tonight's Facebook Live. My name is Nancy Abdu. I'm the CEO and founder of the Australian Dermal Laser Institute, and there we go, where we bring you a whole bunch of training all around aesthetic devices, including IPL, laser, radio frequency, or HIFU, fat cavitation, electrolysis, diathermy, and so much more. If you've joined me on Instagram, hello there, thanks for joining. And if you've joined over here on Facebook or YouTube, good evening, thank you for joining me. So tonight we want to talk all things laser, the difference between Pico and Q-Switch and long pulse, so all the different pulse durations and how it actually has a different impact on the skin depending on the device, obviously that you're using. So we'll talk all about that. We'll also discuss today Q-Switch and Pico lasers when treating melasma. I know a lot of you have difficulty with treating melasma, so let's talk about that as well. And also carbon facial. So, can your device, be utilized for carbon facial? So all things lasers. But before we start, I just want to personally congratulate all the ABIA runners-up. Not runners-up, no, they are finalists rather. So congratulations to all the different finalists. It was very hard to actually go through so many entries because they are quite high quality and yeah, very close actually. So for those of you who entered, well done for entering in the beginning. It's a huge task for you. And for those who are now finalists, congratulations on being a finalist and good luck, for August. So if you haven't bought your tickets yet, make sure you go onto Mocha's either Instagram or Facebook, and you can purchase tickets for the ABIAs there. We'll be there with our team, so hopefully we get to see you and, I don't know, share a dance maybe at the after party. All right, speaking of awards, I just quickly showed you, it was a quick peek of this particular award here. So very proud to have been awarded Best Bespoke Aesthetic Device Training Provider for 2023. So very proud of that as well. It just ensures that we're keeping up with the hard work that my team and I do and deliver. All right, so let's have a look at laser. First of all, laser, what does it stand for? So it's light amplified by stimulation, emission of radiation. And if you've done my training, not all radiation, you would know, not all radiation is actually bad radiation. The light that we're using when we're delivering a laser beam is what we call non-ionizing. So it cannot change your DNA. It can't cause mutations in your DNA. Therefore, the cells that we're targeting are unharmed from becoming mutated essentially. So with laser, it goes through a particular medium, and in the little box, in the actual big box of the device, the light is amplified where there's mirrors. It is stimulated, and eventually it gets so excited that that particular photon or that packet of light will come out through, usually it's a fiber optic, and it comes out of the actual end of your applicator. So that's what actually laser stands for. So when people spell it with a Z, it's actually incorrect anyway, because it is stimulated, not with an S, not with a Z. So that's what laser stands for. It's the acronym. And with laser, usually there's a lot of energy. So what we call high peak power, and it's delivered over a very short pulse duration. So usually in nanoseconds, not milliseconds. So usually it is nanoseconds, and that's a billionth of a second. or picosecond, which is even shorter than a nanosecond. Very, very a trillionth of a second, so really short. So like I said, typically when you have a laser beam being emitted, there's lots of energy and it's delivered over a very short time. And it's that short pulse duration or short pulse width that actually doesn't cause any thermal, a thermal byproduct in the actual skin itself. So we're not relying on heat when we're doing laser. When we're actually treating with a picosecond, because that pulse duration is even shorter yet again, there is no heat experience. There might be a little bit of residual heat, but not as much as, say, a Q-switch. So the longer the heat, or the longer the pulse duration there is, rather, the more heat that will be felt. So when we're comparing that, say, to an IPL, for example, where instead of having high peak power, there's less power and it's delivered over a longer pulse duration. It could be, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 milliseconds, so a millionth of a second. There is heat felt there. And this is why we call an IPL device photothermal. Whereas when we're looking at laser, it's a photomechanical or a photoacoustic response in the skin. And that's why oftentimes we'll actually start, you could hear that snapping. So when the actual laser beam hits the skin, can you open the door for him? He's meowing. When the actual beam hits the skin, we're getting that like snapping sound occurring. So therefore we call it photoacoustic or photomechanical. So there's the sort of the biggest difference between, say, an IPL and a laser. Now with laser, I suppose we've got three sort of different types, if you like. You've got your Q-switch, which is usually delivered in roughly 20 nanoseconds, or we've got pico, so delivered in picoseconds, depending on the machine. And then we've got long pulse. So with your long pulse lasers, they're usually, the pulse duration of that is 300 microseconds. Are you able to open the door for him, please? Sorry. I know, how annoying. Thank you. So with your Pico, that definitely is purely because it's such a short pulse duration, it definitely is not thermal and it's purely acoustic or mechanical, which brings me to why it is great for tattoo removal and melasma treatments. So for a melasma treatment to be, I suppose, effective but not over traumatic in the way that it actually creates a rebound in that pigmentation. Melasma doesn't like heat, we know that, which is why we say you can't treat melasma with IPL or anything that's going to cause thermal trauma, such as radiofrequency or what else? Even HIFU, there's heat, or RF needling or plasma pen will also cause heat. So you cannot treat melasma with anything that's going to cause heat in the skin. And so with a laser, and it's in particular, like I said, a Pico, we're able to, we're not going to say we're going to treat it, we're going to say we can manage it. So you can manage melasma, and essentially what we're doing is we're disrupting the melanosome without destroying the melanocyte. All right, so by doing that, we're not getting the rebounding, we're starting to slowly break down the melanin in that's visible in the skin, and so we're getting, I suppose, to the naked eye, we can start to see less and less pigmentation. However, should there be a trigger, and that trigger could be a hot day, even though you're wearing SPF or your client's wearing SPF, so it could be heat, it could be hot showers, it could be spas and saunas, it could be a fireplace, so any environment when there's quite a lot of heat, or even cold for that matter. It's that hot cold, it's the extremities that can actually cause melasma to darken up, even though you've treated it or managed it. So melasma is a really tricky one, but Pico will be slightly better than Q-Switch because, like I said, the shorter that pulse duration, the less chance of heat, being pushed into the skin essentially, or resonating through the skin. When you are treating melasma, regardless of whether it's with your Q-Switch or your Pico, we're always wanting to cool the skin down. So if you've got a Coolio or a Zimmer or a cold air blower, doing, having the client just holding on to the hose while you're actually treating is going to help, reduce any incidence of heat. And if you don't have a Zimmer, then you can always use a cold compress. So you'll, cool the area first, you'll laze, and then you'll cool again during, and then once you've finished, you'll cool again, just to make sure there is no residual heat in the skin and rebounding doesn't occur. So in particular, you need to do that when we're using Q-Switch. With Pico, not so much. And of course, with whichever method, whether it's Q-Switch or Pico, we're always going to be using very, very low fluences. We're not trying to heat up the skin at all. As soon as there's heat felt, then you've done your job, then you need to move on. So your Q-Switch will still do a job, but you've got to be careful and you've got to ensure that we're still cooling the skin between our passes. When it comes to tattoo removal, because what actually happens with your tattoos, it requires the actual ink molecule to be smashed, essentially. And so what we're doing is we're breaking down that bigger ink molecule into a smaller ink molecule, and that way your body can get rid of it with the usual, elimination systems. So your lymphatic system. Now, of course, with that, because a Q-Switch, the pulse duration is a little bit longer, there's going to be heat, because when the actual laser or the light is actually targeting the pigmentation, it's not the laser that's creating that heat, it's the propagation and the friction of the cells, I suppose, rubbing against each other, and that heat propagates throughout the skin. So it's not actually the laser, it's how the cells respond to the laser light. It's the friction there. And so that's why there's heat felt afterwards. And again, what you're wanting to ensure is we're using lots and lots of ice cold compress before, during, and after, or using a Zimmer when we're doing a Q-Switch treatment. And it's not just for pain, it really is to reduce the incidence of blistering. And with your Q-Switch, because again, we're using such a short pulse duration, we don't get that heat like you do with a Q-Switch. And so effectively you can use slightly higher energies without the incidence of your blistering and burning the skin, and therefore it's a lot more effective in resolving the ink in the tattoo, right? Or fading that ink. Typically, if it's a proper Pico, and I say proper because it depends what's the pulse duration, and different manufacturers will have different pulse durations. Some manufacturers are a little bit naughty, and they'll say that their device is Pico, but it's actually not. It's just really, really short, pulse durations. It's a Q-Switch, but it's very short, and they've called it a Pico. So be mindful of who you buy your Pico device from. Is it truly a Pico or isn't it? So that's your homework to do. So I've lost my train of thought. Okay, so that's your Pico with your tattoo removal. And I was going to say you could treat probably, I'd say, half the treatments with a Pico when we're coming to do laser tattoo removal. So if normal with Q-Switch you're looking at 10 Treatments with Pico, it's typically about half that. It's about 5. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how effective Pico is going to be as opposed to Q-Switch. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you. And if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments box. So next I want to talk a little bit about carbon facial. So if you have a Q-Switch, oftentimes, and it depends on the manufacturer, you may have a setting for long pulse. Cutera have trademarked this. They call it laser genesis. Now, with a laser long pulsed beam, if you like, it is delivered usually over 300 microseconds, so it's a little bit longer, so 3 milliseconds than our nanoseconds. And in that instance, it's based on a photothermal response, right, or principle. And so with laser genesis or with a long pulse 1064 Nd:YAG, we are actually trying to create heat in the skin. And what we're doing with that is we're heating the water in the skin, because the 1064 is highly absorbed by the water in the skin. So by vaporizing the water, we're actually tricking the skin into thinking it's being thermally traumatized, and therefore it sends off those fibroblasts, which then will induce collagen and elastin. So moving on from that, our laser genesis or long pulse, we then also have our carbon facial. So you can't do your carbon facial with a long pulse, of course, because it's too long. You'll end up with too much trauma unless you can manipulate that setting and you can shorten your long pulse. So we're heating up the carbon on the skin. Some devices can do that, some devices can't, so you need to check with the manufacturer. But when we're doing carbon facial, you will usually apply a lotion or a cream on the skin. I personally prefer a lotion. And the Global Beauty Group have got a great lotion that you can purchase. It's only a little bottle, but a little bit goes a long way. You only need a few drops for the face. Now I prefer the lotion because it actually goes into the pores. When it goes into the pores and the light hits the carbon lotion, it basically causes a little micro, it's not so much an ablation, but it's a little micro explosion on the skin, and therefore it's as it comes away, some of the epidermis comes away, and it gives a bit of an exfoliating effect. Not only that, when we're actually targeting the pore itself, we're actually reducing the sebum. So we're heating up that the pilosebaceous unit and the sebaceous gland, and we're actually slowing the oil down. So it will help with someone who's got, say, acne or oily skin. So a lotion is going to penetrate a little bit deeper than a cream. A cream will stay on the surface of the skin a little bit more superficially, and so you'll find that that actual treatment will be more exfoliating and more superficial than a lotion. But either or, try and see which one you prefer, your clients prefer. So when we're doing a carbon facial, we're giving the laser a target. And if you've done my training, you would have heard me talk about black cars and white cars. Black cars will absorb, whilst white cars will reflect. And if we take that analogy to the skin, we're putting a target onto the skin, black car, and in where that's going to be absorbed by the light, right? And so we're actually removing the carbon with our laser, and it's causing these tiny little micro explosions on the skin. So the difference when it comes to when we say doing Pico or Q-Switch, it's going to be more associated with the heat and the erythema in the skin, because the Pico is quite quick. We find there's not as much erythema, and really with a Q-Switch anyway, that erythema may last up to about 3 or 4 hours, if that. and really there shouldn't be any swelling or edema from doing a carbon. So with your Pico, you're going to find that it's a little bit less painful, a little bit less bitey and prickly, and really the downtime should not be too intense with either one. So they're almost on par, I would say. Where you'll find with your laser genesis, where we slot that in when we're doing our carbon facial, we'll actually do that after the treatment. I know some manufacturers say you do your laser genesis first and then you do your carbon. Either way, it's up to you. But I do like to put the carbon on, ablate that off, not ablate that, but blast that off, and then I'll do a laser genesis treatment, which is with my long pulse. So you've got to change your settings around from Q-Switch right to long pulse, and then heat up that skin. By heating up the skin, we're also getting that collagen. So with that treatment, we're giving them, it's like a two-pronged approach. We're giving them an exfoliation, a freshen up, a glow up that happens instantaneously, a little bit of that, tiny bit of swelling. It's really not a lot anyway. Will make their skin feel nice and plump for the next couple of days. So ideal for someone who has an event, the next day and just wants to sort of freshen up their skin, exfoliate their skin. And your laser genesis is going to help with long-term collagen induction, if you like. So it's a two-pronged approach. And so with that, that is becoming a lot more popular. If you do have a laser, you should actually try it, not just for your tattoos. You do need to have a special tip. Usually you're looking at an 8 or a 10 mil, tip size. And so with that, or spot size rather, and so with that you can get through the actual treatment a little bit quicker and effectively. So yeah, hopefully that helps you, and if you want me to discuss anything else, let's have a look here. What have we got here? Someone had asked if we could if we could actually do carbon facial with a Pico, and you can. So we've already discussed that. Yeah, so there you go. So hopefully that is a little bit of insight into what basically a laser is, how it works on tattoos and on the skin. I didn't touch on 532 or the other wavelengths. Mainly I've been was discussing 1064 because that you could treat the skin, you could do laser genesis, you could do carbon with a 1064. 532 is completely different kettle of fish. With your 532, that is mainly for red targets, or what we call sunset targets. So your reds, your oranges, and to some extent also, melanin, superficial melanin. Of course, 532 is going to be a lot less deeper, so more superficial, whereas your 1064 is going to target a little bit deeper in the dermis. All right, so I will be back next week, same time at 7:30, and yeah, if you want me to talk about anything in particular, let me know. If you missed this, you'll be able to watch the recording on YouTube and Facebook. So if you liked it, press like, and I'll see you next week. All right, bye.